If you'd like to go ahead and open up your Bibles to Isaiah chapter 14, Isaiah 14. We're continuing into this study of this great book. So chapter 13, when we look at the historical setting and what he's talking about, keep in mind that these are prophecies, especially concerning Babylon, that aren't going to happen for over 100 years. So who's going to listen to a sermon that isn't going to happen for 100 years? Or if you listened to it and you heard it and it never came to happen and you're getting 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and if you live that long, you're sitting there going, is it ever going to happen? What's going on? Well, that's one of the things about the enduring Word of God, is that the Word of God is not just speaking to those people directly, but it's also speaking to generations that are coming in the future that we can look at. And that's what the beauty of the prophets are, is the way that they can take and shadow in things that are immediate, applicable to the people they're talking to, but also then giving them hope that maybe they're not going to be able to live to enjoy, but that not all is lost, just like us. You know, as we go through our lives, we're looking at the hope that we want for at least our children and our grandchildren and so forth. And so in the 8th century, we're looking at not until the 7th century before most of this is going to happen. So now what's kind of overwhelming is between chapter 13 and 23, we get a lot of woes, a lot of oracles, a lot of judgments coming against nations. I don't know exactly how I'm going to manage it, because as I read it, there's so many wonderful things about that bring out the prophecy of David and the kingdom and things like this. So I'm going to have to figure out how to manage it. Do we go through it or however, because it is very interesting, and it gives you an idea of the condition, the moral state of those nations around them. The big picture of all of this between this section is really showing how God's prophecy and his foresight and his ability to look at the future and predict it. So us, 2,000 years even after Christ, can look all the way back and look at these, look at when it was written, and then look at the historical event and go, that's exactly the way God said it was going to happen. And that's what we're going to see tonight, some of this. So chapter 13, we looked at that last week, was more of a direct oracle towards Babylon. Now remember, the use of Babylon is also referring to nation as well as the city. It also later on is going to become basically synonymous with a wicked, evil nation. Very similar to the way that Egypt had become a byword to the Hebrews when they came out of captivity. And they would always bring up, oh, none like Egypt, because that reminded them of that condition that they lived under before they were delivered out. Babylon is going to be that. We know that also in Revelation, the use in that word of Babylon, referring to a city of Babylon, but Babylon, by the time John writes it, is gone. So it has a great significance in revealing the moral decadence of the city and the nation of Babylon. Even though it was, in a lot of ways, technologically, culturally, it was really advanced. There was a lot of things about it that archaeologists have dug up, but there's some very wickedness about it that is revealed when we look at the prophecies. Now, when we come to 14, it's still dealing with Babylon, but now he's going to zone in. God's going to zone in on the king himself of Babylon. And we're not going to get to Assyria and Philistia, because this is kind of in the chapter as well, because I need to stop and dig in and do kind of a deep dive on one aspect of this, because you've heard it. And I question it, but I think it is important, and I think you'll appreciate it when we come to it. So the first part, chapter 1, verse 1 and 2, let's go ahead and read. For the Lord will have compassion on Jacob, and will again choose Israel, and will set them in their own land. And the sojourners will join them and will attach themselves to the house of Jacob. And the peoples will take them and bring them to their place. And the house of Israel will possess them in the Lord's land as male and female servants. They will take captive those who were their captors and rule over those who oppress them. What you find is a reversal. So remember, he's already discussed in the previous chapters how that this judgment was going to come upon them and how devastating it was going to be and how they're going to be taken off and all these horrible things were going to be happening and devastation, destruction, and mayhem and just some of the most graphic, horrific pictures you can imagine. But yet he always gave hope. And so this is a part of that same oracle that he's dealing with and showing the great hope that's still there, that he's still going to have compassion on them. He's going to keep his promise to Israel, and he's going to bring them back, and they will be restored. A reversal from being a captive that's beaten and abused to actually they are going to be the ones that are empowered. Now, that's why I said about trying to manage all these woes on these other nations. It's difficult to try to do it without kind of maybe losing your attention. Is because it helps to show us, one, the moral decadence around, but also God's sovereignty on all nations. That God wasn't a God of just Israel, but the fact that he's a God of all nations and showing his sovereignty. And that within that, we see how that this allusion towards the Gentiles, whenever the king's David's seed, who is the Messiah, is going to come, how that all nations would come to Zion. And so that's one of the reasons it's kind of hard for me to leave out going through specifically all of those. So we'll see how we handle that. So he's talked about that, verses 1 and 2, this great compassion that God, this great hope that they're going to have, even though they're going to go off and be let off all over the world, thousands of miles away to Babylon. But then this is what's really neat. And this is where it gets fun. This is where, sometimes people say, does God have a sense of humor? Does God have sarcasm? What's his personality? He has it all. And that's what's cool about what he does. Because he has this taunt of Israel. So we're going to read a little bit, 3 through 11. But listen to it. Because sometimes we read stuff and we don't understand. So this is God kind of, his people, once they've been set free, like looking back at those who had treated him so badly and kind of taunting them. When the Lord has given you rest from your pain and turmoil and the hard service with which you were made to serve, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. How the oppressor has ceased, the insolent fury ceased. The Lord has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers, that struck the peoples in wrath and unceasing blows, that ruled the nations in anger and unrelenting persecution. Now, he's talking about those who are going to dominate them, okay? So, he's talking about how they were treated in this. That ruled the nations in anger, unrelenting persecution. The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing. The cypress rejoice at you, the cedars of the Lebanon, saying, since you were laid low, no woodcutter has come up against us. Sheol beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come. It rouses the shade to greet you. All who were leaders of the earth, it raises from their thrones all who were the kings of the nations. All of them will answer to you. You too have become weak as we. You have become like us. Your pomp has brought you down to Sheol. The sound of your harps, maggots are laid as a bed beneath you, and worms are your covers. So he's describing, he said that whenever they return and they come back, they're going to look back historically and taunt them. Oh, yeah, well, we were captive. Look how horrible you treated us. And just look at the arrogance that you flaunted and all the things that you were doing. Now where are you? Oh, your bed is with the maggots. You're in the grave. And he talked, in this he also is talking about a lot of the other nations that he's going to be more specific that I was telling you about the other chapters. He's going to go around Moab, Damascus. He's going to talk about Philistia. But so he kind of lumped those in when he said not only just Babylon, the king of Babylon, but all those other kings as well are going to be brought low. And then you're going to look back when God brings Jacob back and restores them, that they will have the glory as well. Now this is where it gets interesting. Let's go ahead and read. The fall of the day star. Now remember, what's he talking about? He's talking about the king of Babylon overall. He's talking about the kings. Keep that in the context. Because sometimes we break these passages up. So what have we just all said? We've been talking about how that Jacob is going to be restored and how that they're going to turn, that Babylon is going to be taunted and they're going to use this against them. And it's about the king of Babylon. And so keep that in as we say that. And he's talking about the king of Babylon. How you have fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven, above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of the assembly in the far reaches in the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought low down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. So has anybody heard of day star? You ever heard that? Lucifer falling? But who is he talking about? He hasn't changed. And this is where it gets interesting. So I want to deep dive a little bit and talk about this word or this phrase, the fall of the day star, because it is important. And it's not a major deal, but sometimes when we talk about this, some people think that Jesus was referring to seeing Satan fall, and that thinking that Isaiah was talking the same thing. So I'm going to try to hopefully show that. Now, one of the things is in the translation itself. And I don't go off into the Greek, as you know, as when I teach. But one of the things with the Hebrew, as it was written in the original text and such, the manuscripts, it was shining one, the son of dawn. And most scholars, they will agree that it's probably referring to the morning star, literally Venus. Because it was one of the first ones just for them as it is us. When you get up really early in the morning, you can go out and you can see what's one of the last stars. It's Venus. And so even the scholars will say this is probably what God through Isaiah is showing this illusion. This is something that they would have been familiar with. They understood it. We're diving back over 2,000 years into their culture and the way they saw things, the way they spoke. And so they called it a morning star as well. And what did it do? It'd fall. It would set. Now, in the Septuagint, the word there, now remember what the Septuagint is. It's the document that was created during the Intertestament period where they had come together and they were commissioned to take from the Hebrew language, because by the time they come back from Babylon, the Jews didn't really speak Hebrew any longer. They spoke a slang, Aramaic. And so it was kind of a mixture. And so one of the things that was why they commissioned them to write that was to take it, the original manuscripts, from the Hebrew to Aramaic. So that's why I'm showing you that the Hebrew here as well is Shining One and Son of Dawn. But even in the middle intertestament period, or they'll call it also, scholars will say, the Second Temple period, the Jews between the time that they restored everything to when Christ came, they also saw this as the same way. And so it was also referred to as dawn bringer, because when does the star up? It brings the dawn. So we're looking at something very specific, kind of an illustration and a comparison to who? To who? Nebuchadnezzar, looking all the way back, looking to the king of Babylon. Now, the Vulgate is a later manuscript where the King James comes from, another translation, so sometimes it's come out as Lucifer. See where we're going? How Lucifer? Who's Lucifer? Where did that come from? Where did that guy get the name Lucifer? Satan get the name Lucifer? You know, and so that's something that's very interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on here. But again, in the historical context of what we're talking about, this is a taunt song. It's a song taunting against the king of Babylon. It uses the early and the Near Eastern mystical imagery, dawn of gods. They looked at the stars as gods, and so when one would fall down, the sun, the Venus would set. It was like a god was going down. So from their cultural perspective, the way they viewed things, this is what they looked at. It was also kind of a royal hubris, contrasting from the glory to the humility. Glory of being royalty to then falling down to nothingness. And especially since, if you'll remember what we were reading, it said, you heard the way the king of Babylon was saying, basically, I'm going to ascend up to God. I'm going to make myself. And they looked at the stars, and the planets to them were stars. They looked at them as gods. And so now he draws that imagery, Isaiah, to the king of Babylon as being this star that's going to fall. That star is going to fall. Now just look again at the structure of this passage we just read. Verse 12, the fall of the shining one, the star coming down. 13 and 14, the arrogance that we see of the ascent to heaven that he's proclaiming out loud. And then 14, the casting down to Sheol, death. So what do we have? A reversal. Going from the glorious position in the morning, the bright dawn of morning. And what does Venus do? It sags. And so what's beautiful in the morning? It's a brand new day. And so here he is, being proud and arrogant and boastful. And so if we look at this, one of the things is that, one, he's using celestial star imagery of Venus to show that type of movement of Venus and comparing to it. Now, this is where we talk about, it's kind of a satire of the pride of the Babylonian king. And that's something that we need to, like I said, keep that in the context. It was not originally about Satan, but a parody. Now, why did it come up? How did that happen? Well, when you go to the Gospels, you read like Luke 10:18. I saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. And some interpreters believe that, oh, well, there it is, but that's not it. Now, this is the way maybe modern today. There was a very historical event that happened in the 1820s in an area called Texas, and it was the Alamo. And it became a battle cry. Remember the Alamo. What did that mean? Well, all of us today, we're not so far removed that we know what that means. People today even will sometimes say that. I've heard one time, a guy who had a football team that was not really good, he said, you just remember the Alamo. Now, if you were 2,000 years in the past, they'd look at you and go, what are you talking about? What does that mean? And so that's something that when Jesus is using that in the Gospels, he knows that they understand that that's what Isaiah was using in reference to the king of Babylon, in that he thought he was arrogant and proud, and that Babylonian king was going to fall like that. So what is Jesus is doing when he talks about Satan falling, he's using a comparison and saying, just like what Isaiah said, just like what happened to the king of Babylon, he's going to fall. And so that's sometimes that happens. And so in Matthew 11:23, he also uses this as well, this idea of being brought down. He talks about Capernaum being brought down to Hades. And so there's a lot of this language that Jesus is using is just kind of a link for the people who are listening to him. They understood it, just like you understood what the Alamo was when I talk about that. And so Jesus was using that type of imagery to tie in the people he was talking to. And really, what is more interesting is the idea that it never even really became that Isaiah was talking about Satan until the 3rd and 4th century with Origen and Augustine, what they call the church fathers. They're the ones that put that on there and said, oh, Isaiah was talking about Satan. And so that's why I wanted to kind of dig into that about that. And it's all about the idea of the arrogance of the humans. Human arrogance and the inevitable downfall. This is also, again, showing the great sovereignty of God overall. So we'll continue and look at the rest of Babylon, and then we'll wrap this up for this evening, because it really just kind of now focuses in and gives more detail, and there's not a lot of cryptic or hard things to understand, but graphically it gives us a picture, and it does predict something that did happen historically. We can look at and say, yep, that exactly happened. So let's start with 16. We're going to read 16 through 27. Those who see you will stare at you and ponder over you. Is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world like a desert and overthrew its cities, who did not let his prisoners go home? All the kings of the nations lie in glory, each in his own tomb. but you are cast out, away from your grave, like a loathed branch, clothed with the slain, those pierced by sword, who go down by the stones of the pit, like a dead body trampled underfoot. All the other kings, they got royal burials. But the king of Babylon, no. He's going to be treated with his body with total disrespect and just discarded like everybody else that's slaughtered around him. You will not be joined with them in burial, because you have destroyed your land. You have slain your people, made the offspring of evildoers nevermore be named. Prepare slaughter for his sons because of the guilt of their fathers, lest they rise and possess the earth and fill the face of the world with the cities. I will rise up against them, declares the Lord of hosts, and will cut off from Babylon the name of and remnant. You notice that remnant, that when he comes to bringing the judgment on Israel, he always gives hope to the remnant. But to Babylon, not even a remnant. Not even the remnant. Nor their descendants, nor their prosperity, the Lord says. And I will make it a possession of the hedgehog and pools of water, and I will sweep it with the broom of destruction, declares the Lord of hosts. I mentioned last week about the city of Babylon. To this day, it has never been occupied. From the time that this was fulfilled and the Medo-Persians destroyed the city, it's never been occupied. Saddam, the Iraq president, tried to do some rebuilding. But you can go on, and I really do. I said this last week. I really do encourage you. Go to YouTube and search some of the biblical archaeology videos about Babylon. And it's incredible how it is exactly the way this prophecy said to this day. Now, there's a city there, but it's on the other side of the road. And it's just like these old adobe walls and just crumbled, and everything is just around. And this guy who is traveling through there, he's walking around the site and describing what was there, and they kind of use graphics to overlay what the city of Babylon looked like. And while he's there, all of a sudden he stops and he goes, there's all these jackals running through the area. And that's exactly what the prophet said. Hedgehogs and nothing but the jackals will live there. And they're doing that to this day. That to me is just so incredible when you think of that. So God is going to remove the memory of Babylon. And he did. He totally removed it. So that's as far as we're going to go tonight. We'll pick up the rest of it because we're going to move on as it goes on. So I hope that you're enjoying it. If you got some questions or comments, I hope that you would share them with me. And so that's this wonderful letter that sometimes, this book seems like it's too overwhelming, the prophecy of Isaiah, but it's not. If you take it right and we don't try to overthink it and things like that. So if you're with us this evening and there's something that we can do to help you in your relationship with God, I hope that you will take this time and this opportunity that we always have, that as we're singing this song, if you need any help at all in your relationship with him, establishing it or encouraging it, restoring it, or you have any need at all, please think about it while we stand and sing the invitation song.